All right, so let's get into this Acacia Strain album, the Gravebloom, and here to help me review it is Drew, metal expertise and hardcore connoisseur, if you will. Now, let's give a little backstory on this band. The Acacia Strain, they're a deathcore band from Massachusetts.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, that's true. Who formed in 2001 as a six-piece band, and their debut album, And Life is Very Long, was released in 2002. So then after the fourth album, which was called Continent, in 2008, the group began seeing some success, which includes opening for bands like Hatebreed, Crowbar, and they played with the Casualties, as well as a spot on the Warped Tour, including the Warped Tour this summer. They're on that tour right now. In 2012, they signed to Rise Records and released a sixth album, Death is the Only Mortal. And then over the years, Acacia Strain has gone through several lineup changes, but the singer Vincent Bennett remains the only original member. And now this latest album is their eighth record, and it features new bassist Griffin Landa. And I actually heard Death is the Only Immortal before, and it didn't really leave an impression on me. It was like that basic metalcore, if you want to use that word instead, a deathcore that I've heard before. So it's kind of like, it's cool, but I don't really remember as well.
Death is the Only Mortal. Didn't really sit well with me. I think still to this day, 3750 is their best work, because at the time they had three guitarists, and if you listen to that album with headphones, it's really interesting. The guitarists are frequently playing different things, playing off of each other, and this was also, I think, 2004. So it was. You kind of flippantly throw out the term deathcore. In those days, I mean, that wasn't even a term, or if it wasn't used very often. And it was just this kind of like raw, heavier, metallic hardcore or metalcore, if you will. It was just like a really, really, they were just like a really heavy, interesting band at the time. I fell off of them a little bit as the years went on, and I think I picked them up when they put out Continent, which was 2 albums after that. I guess that was their 4th album.
Yeah.
I started listening to them again. Really liked Continent. Really like Wormwood, which I think is one of their best. Definitely angling for the top spot against 3750. And then I kind of fell off again. Death is the Only Mortal. I listened to it. Wasn't really that into it. Didn't really give them much time until you asked me to review this album with you. So yeah.
Well, okay, then that means I actually got into them too late. So the problem that I guess is gonna have is with me. We've reviewed a lot of albums on our previous shows. I listened to a lot of metalcore, deathcore, stuff like that, and I feel like it's become a cliche among itself to me. And all those blast beats, like breakdowns and like the growling vocals, has like grown stale and generic. And little spoiler alert, you guys, this band is no exception. With the opening track, which is called Worthless, the band like follows like the formula with like the chugga like chunky guitar riffs, angry yelling vocals, and occasional like double bass drumming that happens here and there. And for me, I was kind of like, when I hear deathcore bands, it's like I want to hear them do something different that makes stand out from other bands. And that particular song, I noticed at the end of the track, it's got like this kind of like softer ending to it, and like some quiet like spoken words happening. So I'm like, that helped break the monotony. I don't know if it's from a movie, but I was kind of like, it's all right. But for me, this album didn't really pick up till the third track, which is called Bitter Pill, and that's when it's like a faster hardcore beat that happens, and like that brief moment.
I think that song is a standout on that album.
Yeah, and that moment when like that moment of silence before like that breakdown hits was like fucking epic, and I was like, yes, this is what I like to hear. Because honestly, for me, that reminded me a lot of the band Hatebreed, which they said they toured with, and I feel like I hear them.
They're also influenced by them.
Yeah, I can totally tell, not just with the music, but also his voice. What do you think of Vincent's vocals, like as in the whole genre and in the band generally? Do you like how he sounds?
Yes and no. I think that he is kind of monotonous. His voice is a little monotonous. That being said, I think he has the best enunciation in all of heavy music. I listened to this album a few different times, 3, 4, maybe 5 times, and I listened to it on the drive over here. I was singing along to "Worthless" because it was, I could understand what
he's saying.
What he's saying. Yeah.
I like the title track has.
He doesn't have a lot of range though.
Right. The title track I like when they do like that whole like blood curdling like growling like yelling vocals, and I thought that was sinister as on that song. I was like, all right, I can get with that, and like halfway through that song, you actually finally get a guitar solo. It's like, and I know that's like a kind of a no in this kind of genre, but that's what I look for when I want to hear a band like doing something that stands out from the others. Some guitar solos, some like like kind of like eerie, like, keys and stuff like that happening. And when I got the guitar solo on that song, I'm like, all right, that's kind of cool too. And I noticed this band actually has a lot of the songs. They have like that high pitched like lead guitar layered into the background on certain songs that just gives it that whole like feel. And I think it really worked well on the song called Abysmal Depths. And in addition to that song, it's like a quiet bass guitar progression that begins the song and kind of ends the song. And it gives it kind of more like a slight alternative metal feel, but very, very slight. So, do a lot of bands do that? Like when they have like that high pitched guitar happening? I don't hear a lot of bands doing that.
Are you talking about kind of the background stuff?
Yeah.
I feel like, going back to when they were a 6-piece band, I think that's kind of been their signature to a certain extent. In terms of songwriting and recording, they've always kind of had this like layered guitar sound. They've had like a lot. It's been like thick. It's almost been like a wall of sound.
Yeah.
And there's always just like stuff going on in the background.
All right. So, as you can kind of tell from me, I wasn't really digging this album, and when I looked, it's only 11 tracks, so it's not that bad, if you say. And when I looked down at the track listing, and I saw that the last song, which is called Cold Gloom, was like over 9 minutes long, that you can imagine my disapproval on that. Like,
did you like the last song?
No, it's basically the same thing as the whole album, but just longer and more drawn out to me.
I think okay. So here's what I have to say to you. Okay.
Okay, I'm listening.
Jarrell, you ignorant slut. Listen, I think that this album is definitely not their best, definitely not their worst. I think that just to give you a little background, they lost their one guitarist, and who was also the main song. They didn't lose him; he's still alive.
Okay, they know where he is.
Yeah,
where'd he go? I can't find him.
But yeah, he was even after he quit, he was still kind of in the band and like writing music for them. I think he left after Death is the Only Mortal.
Okay.
He was the main songwriter on The Dead Walk, Continent, and Wormwood.
Okay.
And I feel like Death is the Only Mortal was you could tell that he was kind of over it. His name was what's his name? Daniel Laskowitz.
Okay.
He was I don't think he was an original member, or maybe he was, but he I think had been in the band almost as long as Vincent, or no, he has been in the band as long as Vincent. Yeah. And like I said, he was the main songwriter.
Uh-huh.
You could tell that he was kind of not into it anymore with Death is the Only Mortal. It's kind of, it all sort of sounds the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of bland. Nothing's happening on that album. I didn't really care for it when I first heard it. I think I've listened to it maybe 2-3 times since I've heard it. And it came out like 6 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
But if you listen to Continent and Wormwood and The Dead Walk, there's almost like a pop sensibility to it. It's very formulaic, but kind of in a good way.
Right.
There's a lot of hooks. There is verse, chorus to a lot of the songs, a lot of lead work that just gets stuck in your head. And that's what I've kind of had a problem with since he's left, even though Death's the Only Mortal was really the exception to his songwriting prowess, I guess you could say. Overall, he's a really good songwriter, and his the lack of his presence is really felt, I feel like, on this album.
Okay.
While I think overall it is a good album. It's not as good as a few their older stuff. I think with Gravebloom, like I said, I was by the last time I listened to it, I was singing along to Worthless. I think that song a little bit repetitive, not great, also kind of catchy.
I didn't like. That's the thing. It's so like it's not a faster song. Like a lot of the songs on this album are like
there's a lot of mid-pace
slow,
stuff.
Mid-pace. It's kind of like it's just going through the motion of metalcore or the genre. And I'm gonna do my rating first, and being that you're more of a metal dude, so you'll bring this review home. Like you said in the beginning when I said they were a deathcore band, you said I rated it different. And even the band will say the same thing. They hate that label of being called deathcore.
I think you misunderstand the label. Deathcore to me is it's mainly just death metal with some hardcore sensibilities.
Right.
With Acacia Strain, and I wanted to go back to something you said about the last song on the album.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's talk about the last song first, and I'll do my rating.
Okay. You said you didn't like it because it's 9 minutes long. It's really drony, and I think that's the point. The Acacia Strain has always set themselves apart from deathcore, even though I think they can be kind of thrown into that genre, as being kind of they're a mix of hardcore death metal and doom metal, I think, or sludge metal.
Okay.
I
noticed the sludge metal, definitely.
I think the last song, Cold Gloom, that was very much them trying to go into that area. They wanted it to be slow and droney, and I totally got that. It's very much more along the lines of like a Electric Wizard or Acid Witch, like something doom metal. I guess a more accessible band would be like like a Black Sabbath or a Sword. It's very much in its own head, while still
it's metacore.
Yeah, kind of. Maybe get high and then listen to it, and you'll get it more.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's my bad. So I think for a band that hates that deathcore like label, to me it seems like they have no problem following like the ingredients of like that subgenre. Like songs like Walled City and like the Callous Mouth, like use the standard blast beats, while every other song has like the low growling vocals mixed with like sludgy death metal riffs, like we said. And this album sounds like something Satan would listen to if he needed to cure his insomnia. With all that festival deathcore metalcore bands systematically like creating like the same sound, it's almost impossible to tell them apart. And I really can't comment on like the lyrics like you did, because I didn't really understand a lot what he was saying overall, yelling. Sometime I picked up a line here and there, but for the most part, I don't know what he's saying. It's clear to me that the Acacia Strain really doesn't have anything to say, both lyrically or musically, on this album. And I'm giving this album a skip this, because it is so f***ing boring. And that's my rating on that. I've heard a lot of death metal doing this show, and a lot of metalcore, death metal, whatever these guys want to call themselves, and I need to hear somebody breaking some new ground, because I cannot stand the boring. Drew, go ahead.
This is going to be multi-pronged for me, I think, and I think just I think I like this album significantly more than you do, mainly because I'm one of the initiated. I'm their target demo,
right? Hence why you're here.
I'll tell you, the first song, Worthless, it overstays its welcome, but it's welcome nonetheless. Plague Doctor is a decent follow-up. Bitter Pill, like you said. Mm-hmm. Love that song, actually.
Yeah.
Especially the breakdown towards the end with the pinch harmonics. Amazing.
My God. Yes.
And then going out on Cold Gloom, really, I think that's a solid last song. That's what I want for my just metal albums, period, is something spacey and dark at the end of the album. It's perfect. So we're doing this on like a five-star rating. I would say 3.5, really. I would say download it.
All right.
And then if you like it enough, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to own it. if it's your thing. But definitely, I would recommend downloading it and then making up your mind. Now, if you are an Acacia Strain fan, I would say definitely buy it. And you know what? Even if you're just like a fan of metal, death metal, hardcore, anything that this band kind of covers, any sort of genre in that realm,
Right.
Yeah, buy it.
All right. So I see that you guys might be confused what to do, but yeah, if you heard the new Acacia Strain album, let us know in the comment section what you think of it, or send us a lengthy email if you have more to say, and tell us what your opinion is of that as well. We'd love to hear what you think.